In Photoshop, you can get very creative with the gradient tool, typically creating interesting backgrounds. In this video, we're going to look at how that works. We're going to add a gradient, we're going to make a gradient, and we're going to save a gradient. So, buckle up and let's get to it. My name is Ken Fisher and this is Livelink Training. A fundamental part of just about every background is some type of gradient. Now, a simple gradient is a gradual blend between two colours, and in our case in Photoshop these colours are the foreground and the background colours. Now the gradient tool allows us to do that. Now here it is. I can either click on that or I can tap G on the keyboard to select it. Now let's look up at the top and look at the options for the gradient tool. Now up here we've got this little down arrow here next to this little swatch, and if I click on that we've got some presets, and if I hover over you can see we've got a foreground to background, which in this case is black to white. We've got a foreground to transparent, we've got a black to white, we've got a red to green, we've got a blue to orange, and then we've got some more complex ones which we'll look at later. Now let's start with, let's say, a foreground to background. So we'll just click on that little preset and then I'll click somewhere just to close that down. And let's pick a colour. We'll say a foreground colour. We'll have red. So we're going to transition from red to white. Now the foreground colour is going to be dominant from where we click first. So from the edge of the document to where we click is going to be the foreground colour. And the background colour is going to be anywhere after we release. So just an example, if I click down here and I drag and then I let go here you can see it's completely red. At this side it's completely white, and then because I left a big area in between there's a large transition. Now I'll just undo that with Control and Z. Now I'll try a different one. So if I click here and then do a short distance and let go, you'll see I get a different gradient. It's still red at the top and white at the bottom, but because I only left a short distance in between, I only get a very small transition from red through to white. I'll undo that again. Okay, so that's the gradient, but now we've got different types of gradient. So if we look up here on the tool options bar again, by default we've got the linear gradient selected, which was the one we saw earlier. But we can also have a radial gradient. So if I click on that one and I'll go somewhere in the middle and I'll click and drag out towards one of the corners, I get a radial gradient. Next one along is the angle gradient. So I can click and again I'll drag up into the corners and it goes round and wraps round in like an angle. So it goes from full red through a transition to white. And we've got the next one is a reflected gradient. So if I click on the reflected, if I click in the middle and drag it up and then let go, what it'll do is it'll go from red to white, which is the transition, but it reflects it downwards as well. And you can do this in different angles. So I could do it this way and it would reflect it again. We've got from white to red and back to white again. And then finally we've got the diamond gradient, which is it's not bad this for that, getting that little perspective or 3D effect. So if I click in the middle and drag it out and let go, you get like a little diamond effect, and I quite like those. Okay, we'll undo that again. Now, as I said earlier, we have got some more complex gradients. So if I go up into the tool options bar here and click on, say, this one, which is blue, red and yellow, I'll select again a linear gradient just to show you how it works, and then I'll click and I'll drag and I'll let it go. And you can see now I'm transitioning from blue through to red and through to yellow. Now we can create our own gradients. If I go up here and click actually on the gradient swatch itself, it opens up the gradient editor. And this shows you the gradients that come with Photoshop. And there is more. If we go up and click on this little cog up here, you can see that below this line we've got colour harmonies 1 down to spectrums. They're all different gradients that ship with Photoshop, but they're not loaded in. And if I say click on metals and say replace the current, no, I want to append them because I want to add them, you'll see now that there's more gradients appear underneath, and these are the ones we've just added. Or you can load in gradients from third parties by clicking on the load button. Now you can be creative and make your own gradients. So let's do that. We've got as foreground to background colours as red to white, so we'll start off with a simple one. We'll just click on the foreground to background gradient, and then we've got a transition from red through to white. Now these bottom stops here, these are the colours. So if I click on this bottom stop, I get a colour. I can click in and get a colour picker, and I can change that to say blue, and we'll make it a little bit of a lighter hue, so we'll sing it somewhere there. And then at the other end we can change that to another colour. So at the white end we'll click on that, and instead of white we'll select, well, let's select red. So we'll transition it from blue through to red. So we've now got a new gradient, and this little diamond in the middle, that's the centre point, that's the centre of the transition. I can move it either towards the blue or towards the red. Now if I want something more complex, I can actually add other colour stops. I've got 2 at the minute. So let's say I'll click just here, just click to add a stop, and then I can add a different colour. So I'll go for this one and say we'll add a really gaudy one. Let's go for a greeny colour. Okay, this is the gradient of all gradients. And again we can change the centre point. And then let's go for another one. We'll have another colour. We'll say somewhere there. And we'll go for, I don't know, let's say a purpley colour. And then click OK. So we've now created a very complicated gradient there, and we can save it out. So I'm going to call this Kengrad. Oh, no, not Kungrad. We'll call it Kengrad. And then we'll click the new button. And that's going to add it onto the bottom here. So the very last gradient now is called Kengrad. So it's there as a preset for me to use. So I can just come and click on it, and it's ready to go. And then I can click OK and click and drag, and I've got my gradient going from blue to green through to purple and through to red. So are there any other uses for these gradients? Well, yeah, we can actually blend them with layers underneath, or we can use them to actually enhance some of our images. So let's have a look at that. Here we've got a little bit of a landscape image, and the sky we'd like to try and add a little bit of drama to. So in the layers panel, you see I've added a new layer, a new blank layer, and I'm going to use a gradient. Now if I go into the gradient picker here, if I go down to this one, this is a neutral density. So it's like a neutral density filter, like an ND filter. So if I click on that, and then I move into here, and then I can click and drag down, something like that, and let go, it's going to put a darkening effect right along the top of the image. Maybe that's not so good. Just a minute. Let's get rid of that. And I'll go further down with it. So we'll click there and we'll drag down to just below the horizon. And there we go. So we've got a darkening effect now, and you can see what's happening here. We've got like a little bit of a gradient going from a grey down to 0. But now what I can do, because it doesn't look particularly good, does it? Let's be honest. I can blend it. So let's have a look at a blend mode. Let's try overlay. Oh, that's a little bit better. That's adding a little bit of contrast, a little bit of drama to that sky. It's maybe a little bit too much, so let's try soft light. That's a little bit better. That's giving us a little bit of drama, a little bit of more detail in that sky. And if it's still too much, you can play around the opacity. There we go. Just adding a little bit of pop to that sky. So that's it for gradients. I think you can see just how powerful they can be. Have a go, make your own custom gradients. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments underneath the video. If you liked the video, please share it with a friend or two. And click the subscribe button so when I upload a new video, you are the first to know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.